Hi guys, it's Brooke here. I have a super quick favor to ask. When you have a moment, please take just a second to give this podcast a 5-star review. This will help me to continue the podcast and continue to bring these resources to the community. Thank you so much for that 5-star review.
I want music to be the catalyst for this functional skill. And so it needs to be generalized. So if I am saying, okay, I want you to really, you're not using that left side of your body. I really want you to get your eyes on the drum, lift up your left hand and hit it. If I were just to say, play the drum, play the drum, play the drum, if that side of my body is already not utilized typically, then that is not enough of a stimulus to change the motor response. So I might give squeezes on that arm and say, hey, I'm thinking about my arm. This is a way for me to feel where my arm is so that I can move. Then I might say, okay, first thing, I want you to lift your eyes up to the drum. Then I want you to hold that stick and lift the stick up and hit that drum. So I am breaking down the steps of the motor plan to allow that individual to not have to create this complex motor plan, but instead every step is supported.
Hey there, it's Brooke, and welcome to Finding Hope on the Spectrum, where I have heart-to-heart conversations with parents, professionals, and autistic individuals sharing personal insight and life experiences. Together, we dive deep into supports, programs, and stories that offer inspiration, insight, and most importantly, hope for the neurodiverse community. Before we begin with today's topic, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. And if you know someone who this would be helpful for, please pass it along. Remember to always stay curious, be kind, and have an open heart. All right. I'm super excited to get this conversation going. I've been waiting patiently for this opportunity and so grateful for our guest to make the time in her busy schedule. And today we're going to be talking about music therapy and spelling to communicate. And this is a real treat to have our guest, Michelle Hardy, on today. So I'm going to introduce everybody to Michelle first, and then we'll get started. So Michelle Hardy is a board-certified music therapist and a spelling to communicate practitioner. She has over 25 years of experience in the field of autism, dedicating much of her career to providing quality music therapy services for autistic individuals to build non-musical functional skills in the domains of sensory motor, communication, and cognition. A big aspect of Michelle's work has been supporting non-speaking individuals to find their voice, and many of her passions were brought together when introduced to spelling to communicate. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited that we finally found a time.
Great. Well, let's start off with just talking a little bit about your background and kind of what led you into the field of music therapy. And also, I know you got certified as a spelling to communicate practitioner. So if you wanted to share a little bit about both, that would be great.
Sure. So I knew when I was in high school that I wanted to do something with music. That was kind of a passion of mine. But I did not want to teach music. That did not resonate with me. And so I just didn't know what other options there were. So as I was looking for colleges, and I now have 2 college-age kids, and so I'm in this process with them, I was exploring what are the offerings that might suit me. And 2 of the schools that I was interested in had this thing called music therapy. And so one of the schools said, listen, just come and try it. Do a semester. If you don't like it, we'll figure out the next thing. But I was like, sure, I have nothing to lose. And I feel like a really lucky person that in the first semester, I knew it was what I wanted. And music therapy has been around since the 1940s, but I didn't know anything about it. And I graduated college in 1995. So it had been around for a little while, but I didn't know anything about it. And so I fell in love with this idea that music could be healing. It could help with these functional skills of everyday life, but in a way that I now say the work is hidden because you're having fun in this musical experience, but there's so much that happens in the brain. So I lucked out and had this first undergraduate experience with music therapy. And then I took my first job in the school setting. I worked in a school doing kind of inclusion classes at the time in a very small town in Louisiana. So I graduated from Loyola University in New Orleans. I got a job. That's what my parents wanted. So I did that for a few years. And then I was like, this feels like I've lost connection with autism. Was kind of my passion. In my internship, I worked with adults with autism. And so I just felt like I needed to figure something else out. So I was a military brat, so I had moved my whole childhood. And so I was like, what's a move? So I moved to Arizona to work in a private practice that was just music therapy. And that is really where I learned about movement differences in autism, understanding how does someone initiate movement, sustain movement, inhibit movement, transition between movements, things that we take for granted in everything that we do. And that was my first exposure to non-speaking individuals who could type to communicate. So that was mind-blowing. And why weren't we taught this? Why weren't we aware of these skills that just needed a different way to approach, a different avenue to get those skills out? So that really changed everything. And then I decided, then I got invited to the very first neurologic music therapy training. And that was all about how do the elements of music impact the brain, which then in turn impacts functional skills, communication, cognition, and sensory motor. So in that training, I was like, wait a minute, the training was really geared to traumatic brain injury, Parkinson's, stroke. But everything they talked about specifically related to the motor system, I was like, we see this in autism. Why are we not applying rhythm in this way in autism? So this was in probably 1998. And then my colleagues and I came back to apply these things. And we were like, this is just amazing. Look at how when we set a metronome, how that changes focus, attention, fluidity of movement. So all these things happened the way they were supposed to, because then I ended up getting my master's degree from Colorado State, really in this, how is rhythm in particular impacting the brain? And I had this beautiful opportunity for Temple Grandin to sit on my thesis committee because she's a professor at Colorado State. And I could tell you all kinds of fun things about how the conversations went to get her on my thesis. But it was just like everything in my career has really led to, I think, where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing. And so my husband and I ended up in San Diego because of his job now, I think 15 years ago. And when I was here, I met through a family that I was working with, Ann Donnellan, who was really one of the pioneers of movement differences and diversity in autism in particular. So she took me under her wing and was my mentor. So it all kind of was like, how does music therapy impact an individual? But then here's this component of let's approach communication in a different way. And then my master's degree, really looking at the neurological effects of music, and then ending up at San Diego. And that's where I am today. And it has been an amazing experience. So spelling to communicate, my timeline is going to be off, but I think it was about 5 years ago that I did the training in spelling to communicate. And what drew me to that was that I had seen over and over and over again that rhythm impacted the motor system. And so watching people utilizing a gross motor way of communicating versus the fine motor of speech or fine motor of typing, it made sense because it was everything I did. So as somebody is spelling, I would see people creating this external rhythm of like, do you want to play the drums or do you want to play the piano? It would be like D and, okay, get to the next letter, R and, all right, keep it going, U, all right, next letter. And that was everything that my whole therapy career had been built on. So this was like, okay, here's another way that I can use rhythm in an external cueing mechanism to impact communication specifically. So everything just came together, and I feel blessed and grateful because the work I do is really just so fulfilling and so meaningful. And yeah, I'm grateful. I don't know how people go to work every day in jobs that they don't they don't like.
Yeah.
I don't have that experience.
Well, you're exceptional at what you do. I've seen your sessions live, and you also have a beautiful voice that helps as well. But I just love that story. I love your journey, and it's just such a neat thing to hear guests share their stories, because it's a common thread of people's lives kind of coming together into the point where they're at, that was meant to be. Things are presented to them. Temple Grandin. I mean, that's huge to have that opportunity at that stage of your career. I mean, what a gift. So many amazing things that happened. I appreciate hearing that. I didn't know all those details, and what a cool experience you've had along the way that's led you to this level of expertise. And so you mentioned a lot of things. Now, with spelling to communicate, I just want to make sure, for those that don't know what that is, just to do a really brief overview. We'll talk about it and you can kind of embed it in as you share, but just so that people that don't know about what that is, if you could just share really quickly what that program is.
Sure. It is really based, I think, on understanding that cognition can still be intact even when a motor system does not output a communication system that we're all familiar with. So someone who is non-speaking, for example, or minimally speaking, they don't use their voice, they don't use their speech apparatus, the muscles and the motor, refined motor required of speech, because their brains are not wired that way. And so what we've learned over the years is that in most cases, cognition is intact. The understanding of the information coming in is intact, but it's the output that is the issue. So spelling to communicate has evolved from other methods of communication, but in a very replicable protocol that is teachable, that is transferable, but it really is, how do we acknowledge this idea that cognition is intact and feed the brain with stimulating cognitive information, learning, and then how do we shift the communication from the fine motor of speech or fingertips to a movement from the shoulder, a gross motor movement where someone is spelling through. It starts with stencils, larger targets where they're pushing the pencil through a stencil. They're answering questions related to context. We're teaching a motor skill of, here's how I can get information out that isn't initially communication. It starts with, okay, I'm going to read you a passage about the octopus. Did you know that the octopus has 3 hearts? I didn't know that until just this past week. So there's so many, I say that I'm actually smarter because of spelling to communicate, because I have class now.
Yes.
It's like a low demand. It's not like, tell me what you think about this. It's like, hey, let's just practice this motor skill of spelling words related to something that you've just learned. It's teaching a new way of moving your body in a way that brings the eyes together, the gross motor movement from the shoulder, and it allows output of understanding, an output in a communication system. Now, as the individual grows their skills and builds their accuracy, then you move to a 26-letter board. Initially, it's split into 3 different boards so that there are 8 to 9 letters on individual boards, like A to I, J to R, and S to Z, so that you're creating accuracy of the motor output. So as that develops, then the letters become smaller, more letters come on the board, and then you have all 26 letters. And so it goes from structure to, all right, I wonder what you thought about that topic. Or if you could pick the organ that you wanted 3 of related to that, what organ would it be and why? So then you start to get glimpses into expanded thinking, opinions, preferences, desires, goals, needs, and then it's unlimited from there.
It's great. Thank you. That was an awesome overview. And it's such an incredible program. And it's been amazing to see our clients go through it and just witness what a gift it is. It really is such a gift. So I'd love that you had a chance to share about that, and feel free to weave that in as we talk about music therapy too. And so I want to, one of the key things I think that's so important is for our listeners to understand what whole body apraxia is. And I think that there's just so much misunderstanding still in our field about it. And I feel like I learned so much even in the last few years about it. And so I'd love for you to explain what your idea of whole body apraxia is.
Sure. So whole body apraxia, when people hear apraxia, the first thing people think is childhood apraxia of speech, that there is something related to the inability to produce speech. And it's the motor planning. So apraxia is, I think it translates to without praxis, which is not having the motor plan of movement. So we've understood this like really discrete use of apraxia. And over the years, there have been studies looking at if someone doesn't have the control over their mouth and the fine motor, what's happening with the rest of the body? Like, is it really isolated to the mouth and speech? And what they're seeing is that whole body apraxia, gross motor apraxia is also, gross motor movement is also affected. So it goes to what I said earlier about cognition is intact. I could say, Brooke, stand up. You understand that I'm telling you to stand up, but your body is not getting the message from the brain. So there is, I would say, a network issue that information is not getting to the areas of the brain that allow for execution of, that allow for the motor plan and then the execution of that plan. So the information's there and I'm thinking, okay, I need to stand up, I need to stand up, I need to stand up. But I don't have the ability right now with the way my brain is wired to initiate that movement on its own. So if we don't understand that there could be a breakdown in the motor system itself, in the execution of that, then, and I think about Anne Donnellan talking about one of her famous quotes is, the least dangerous assumption is to presume competence, that we believe that this is a competent individual, but the worst case is that we say, I'm telling you to stand up, Brooke, and you're not doing it. So you obviously do not have the cognitive capacity to understand the direction that I've given you. So now a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people are looking at what is the motor problem that is getting in the way. And for many, it's this whole body apraxia. Sometimes people will call it dyspraxia, dyspraxia, is a like more subtle version of that. It's not as obvious as the whole body. And then there's another diagnosis, developmental motor coordination disorder, I think is what it is. So there are these different things that kind of pop in like, oh, there's motor coordination challenges, or there's some subtle motor planning difficulties. They're only in these contexts, or there's motor planning issues of speech. And so now we're looking at this apraxic piece as, what if this is the main issue? What if this is the thing that needs to be addressed that has not been understood, accepted, taught? And if we address that, what are the possibilities? So for me, going back to my whole music therapy and training in neurologic music therapy, which I am now, I think I would say I'm now more of a neurodevelopmental music therapist, because how does the brain develop? And then how do we use rhythm and music to create networks that didn't exist? It's not like a rehabilitative model where those networks were interrupted or lost. We are now creating new networks. So in my work with how rhythm and elements of music impacted the motor system, I was like, of course, this is the issue. Of course, this is where we can create a foundation of support that hasn't been looked at. And I think it is a game changer. And there are still people that do not even entertain this concept. They're still functioning in these archaic teachings of this is a cognitive intellectual disability. And I think it's an important way of looking at the whole person and how can we support these different systems to work together.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. And it made me think of some of my clients that have this whole body apraxia and how even on some days they could do a motor activity, a skill, respond to a thought. And then on other days they just get stuck and they can't.
Yeah.
So it's not even a consistent thing for them.
I'm glad you said that, because that happens day to day, hour to hour. And then it makes people that don't understand this think, well, it's not real because they were able to do it just the other day. So they're choosing not to do it. And then it becomes a whole behavioral issue rather than a behavioral issue or an intellectual disability, rather than actually, I'm dying to do the thing you're asking me to do, but my body is not doing it. Can you please support me in that? And I think about how frustrating that must be to the individual. And so I'm always going to start my detective work looking at, where is the breakdown? Is it in the initiation of the movement? Did they get their body started, but they can't sustain through it? Did they start their body and they did everything but the thing that I asked? So they can't inhibit all those other things. I'm constantly looking at, where's the breakdown? And in some of the individuals that you and I share on our caseload, there are some more complex motor challenges. Like, you don't see the deficits or the challenges at first, because there's so much strength in the movement. There's so much willingness, so much coordination, but then you start to do more complex things and you see the breakdown. And so it's always like, I tell anyone that I am working with or mentoring, just take a step back and just observe for a minute. Like, where is the breakdown? Is it in how they start their body? Is it how they stop their body? Is it how they continue through the movement? And then that gives you a starting point. So that paired with, I do a lot of body coaching in what I do. Everything in a music therapy session is, I shouldn't say everything. My intention in a music therapy session is that music is driving the response. But I'm also a therapist. And so I am building relationship. I am discussing and saying, does this make sense to you? This is what I'm seeing. Does this fit? Because I don't know everything and every person is different. And so it's all this kind of back and forth. How do I acknowledge that the person that I'm working with knows a lot about their body, knows a lot about themselves and what works for themselves? And how do I leverage their knowledge to enhance what I know? And so it's just this constant dance together.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful dance. I think that's what makes it so special. Is that, and you're also working on that self-awareness and self-advocacy, of course, self-regulation, but giving them that opportunity to sit back and reflect and decide what felt right, what didn't feel right, what's working, what's not working. And what a gift. That's an added bonus that they're having practice with. And
I think that there's too much in this world of the authority. Oh, I'm the authority on this. I'm the expert on this. I know a lot of things, but I don't know it in isolation. I have to know what you know and how do those pieces fit together. And then we construct the right answer. We work together to create that. So I encourage anyone listening who's a professional out there to really be open-minded of, what do I know? Because that's true, that exists. Then what might I learn and what might I grow from? It's not just, what do I know and how am I going to implement this in a session, but it's, how am I really thinking about how those pieces integrate? I had a mentorship session this morning, actually, with a music therapy student. And I said, if I'm doing something in my session and I'm not getting the result that I want, I believe it is 100% on me. I either am not addressing the right goal or objective, or I am not using my tools of music and sensory, etc., to elicit the response that I want. So too many times the individual gets blamed, for lack of a better word. Oh, he's just not doing it. Well, maybe we're not doing the right thing. And that's where that conversation and continued communication and openness to learning opens the door for possibility.
Yes, I love it. And it is such a good testament of having a growth mindset, that you're willing and open to grow, to listen, to learn from your clients, as opposed to feeling like you have all the answers. Just in that moment, we all have to adjust and reflect as professionals. And that's such a gift. And it's a good model for the clients to see too. We don't always have to get it right. We can learn and we can grow and we can make adjustments. And that's perfectly acceptable and a great thing, actually, because we learn so much from those moments.
Absolutely. I think it takes the pressure off. I don't have to know all the things. And often if you're in a session with me, I'll say, hey, let's try this crazy thing. Let's try it. It happens. Because I don't want to set it up like, okay, I'm going to do this thing and here's the result we're going to get. I have some ideas around what I might see and how it might affect. But I don't know for sure. And so are you willing to try this thing, give me feedback? And it just feels not contrived. It feels really authentic and connected. And what I say a lot about the work that I do, I love that it brings me to the present moment. I can't think 5 minutes ahead, 2 weeks ahead. It is like, what right now in this moment does your body need? And how do we support you in that? How can I share what I know to enhance what you're trying? And it just feels so good to be in this now moment, because we're always, like, I'll speak for myself, but I'm always worrying about the thing that I don't have control of that's way out in the future. So a great reminder of just being in the moment and trusting that moment.
Oh, it's great. I love that. What a gift that your work gives you that opportunity. And I can say that's exactly how I feel too when I'm in the moment with clients. And you have to be, because you really have to be present and make adjustments. And so to have that mindfulness, and so it's just such a gift. And a beautiful thing, and good for the clients too, to be a part of that experience together. So now I would love for you to kind of walk us through what a music therapy session looks like. I know I've seen them, but if you could kind of bring it to life and share some examples of things that you do in your sessions.
This show is brought to you by Therapeutic Approach to Growth. Therapeutic Approach to Growth helps families with relationship and behavioral needs. Their holistic programs are individualized to honor and respect each family and their autistic son or daughter's sense of self through programs such as relationship development intervention, naturalistic ABA, and animal-assisted services. If you're finding yourself frustrated or discouraged with your current behavioral programs and would like to see more long-term meaningful growth for you and your family, then contact TAG today at www.tagforgrowth, that's TAGFORGROWTH.com, to learn more about how to schedule a consultation or how they can offer you the help your family needs, whether in person, remotely, or in a school setting. Again, that's www.tagforgrowth.com.
So they don't all look the same. They are unique to the individual, and I really try to incorporate preferences for each individual that I work with. But I have kind of a format in my head for music therapy sessions of how I like to kind of outline a structure. The first thing I try to do is, given what I've talked about with this whole body apraxia, I've touched a little bit on sensory processing, sensory motor, like I've used that term, but I work primarily in autism, and the way I think about autism is that there are sensory processing challenges. So there might be unique strengths in sensory information processing. There might be sensations that are an individual kind of shies away from, doesn't like the way I often think of individuals who wear headphones because that auditory can flood the system so quickly that they want to shut it down. It's too unpredictable. So I think about that sensory piece and how our sensory systems organize our ability to feel and process and perceive, and then to output a response. And if we don't feel our bodies, if I can't think of where my foot is in space and I need to walk or I need to step up on something, then if I can't feel my body, I can't do those things or not effectively or efficiently. So I often start my sessions with some sort of sensory experience that I think is going to help the individual feel their body. I love deep pressure. I love when it's tied to rhythm because the brain is then perceiving this tactile and proprioceptive feedback and knowing, okay, it's coming now, it's predictable. Yeah. So I often start with deep pressure, rhythmic deep pressure is what I call it, with the intention to create a better map of the body in the brain. So the sensory strip is getting all of those areas activated to then move actively. So I call that passive input. That's input that someone is doing to the individual with their consent, with their feedback. But I will play a song singing about, I can feel my hand. I can get deep pressure, get squeezes on my hand. But then my intention is to go from this passive input to get a better map of your body to then go to something active. Okay, I got squeezes on my hand. Now I'm going to use my hand to play the drum. Now I'm going to use my hand to isolate my fingers to play the piano. So it really goes from passive input to some sort of active input based on the goals of the individual. So it might be, I might have a goal for someone to use both sides of their body. So then I might pull out what are called paddle drums and have them reach to the same side of the body. So their right hand hits the drum on the right side, their left hand hits the drum on the left side. Then I might have them cross midline where they're crossing over to the alternate side. I might have them use both arms together. So it really depends on what is their goal that is unique to them. What do they need? So we've got this passive deep pressure input, then this active, like, okay, now I'm moving my body in certain ways. It might be the individual that we share who needs much more complex motor challenges. We might walk and drum, move backwards and drum, switch between upper body, lower body, where there's still a predictable rhythmic structure, but it's quick changing. It's like the movement doesn't become automatic or impulsive. It becomes very like, I'm being intentional with this movement. So from that passive to active, then it's more like communication. Like what did that feel like to you? Now that you know what your body needs, do you need more of that? Should we switch to something different? Okay, I'm thinking about some other things that we could do. We have a goal for you to work on your voice. We could do some singing. We could write a song together. Like there's so many things then that it shifts from, but that tends to be my like go-to starting of the session. And then from there, everything kind of evolves to more complex and personalized experiences.
Yeah, no, I had a chance to see the video with you in Temple Grandin on your website, and that is a great one to kind of bring it to life. That was those paddle drums you were just talking about, and it was fascinating to see that clip, and that was quite a while ago, right? That was
quite a while before my fourth child. I will say that experience, if I can talk for a minute about that.
Please.
When I went to Colorado State, I knew she was there and I was like, I'm going to have her on my thesis committee. And I was so confident, but she's a celebrity. She's a big deal. And when it came down to it, I was so nervous to even approach her. And my husband, we were on a trip So Colorado State is in Fort Collins. My husband and I had come back from a trip. I think I was pregnant with our first kiddo, and we were on an airport shuttle from the airport to the parking structure. And there was construction happening. It was chaotic. And we got on this tiny little airport shuttle, and she's sitting there.
Oh my gosh.
On the van, in the van. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is double Grandin. What am I going to say? What am I going to do? And my husband says, like, leans over and says, I think that's the person you've been putting off talking to. And I was like, don't say anything. Don't say anything. And then he said, okay, you have until we get to the car to either say something or I will. And I was like, you are not allowed to say anything. He does not know autism. He does not know music therapy. Like, he's a wonderful man, but I was like, give me a minute. And so I took the risk. I took a deep breath and introduced myself, and she was lovely. She said, listen, here's my card. Call me on Monday. Like, well, but in the thesis defense, when you're preparing to defend your thesis, it is all about what have you learned in your whole master's, your graduate program, and they could ask anything. And it's all about the theory and why are you doing this? And I'm a music therapist. I think I'm really good at what I do. I'm good in the moment. But if you were to say, tell me what chapter 4 of that's not, I learn through application. Like, that is like when I see, it's all about experience. And so I had studied so hard for the theory, and okay, if they're going to ask me about parts of the brain, I'm ready for it. And she said, enough of this theoretical BS. If you had one chance to show me what would work with a child with autism, what would you do? And I remember that moment of like, this I can do. Like, this is what I do all the time. I can do this. So I said, I'd pick the paddle drums. And she was like, okay, let's go. So we stood in the hallway of the music building, and she did it with me. She gave feedback. She's the one who said I could use those videos and put them online because she thought it would make a difference for people. So
wow.
That is probably one of the biggest highlights in my career. It was
just a story.
I know. It was really cool.
I just love that she was sitting on that bus. I mean, that was meant to be.
I know. Because I could have chickened out, which what a bummer that would have been if I had finished my degree and not taken that opportunity.
I know. Just a testament to going towards opportunity, going towards things, even though they're uncomfortable.
That's right. That's right.
Well, it's a great video. And I mean, you were a pro back then, and that was a cool experience to have with her. Very cool. Well, let's talk about body coaching. I know you mentioned some body coaching. That's probably a term not everybody knows. And so I'd love for you to share just a little bit more about what body coaching is and why it's so important for individuals with apraxia.
So, because the information gets into the brain, a direction is given, the information gets into the communication centers of the brain, that information is processed receptively. I understand the direction you're giving me, but the breakdown occurs when we get to those higher level, more frontal lobe responses. And it's within the motor plan of the output. So if I say to somebody, I'm gonna use it related to music therapy, but you read in the beginning that I'm all about the purpose of music therapy is to address non-musical skills. So it's not that I want somebody to learn to play the piano with me. That might become a secondary benefit, but it really is, how do we get you to isolate your fingers? You can't isolate your fingers. So we're going to use the piano for that. What if you kind of don't really integrate the left side of your body? Then that's where I'm going to really emphasize the left side, playing an instrument in some way. But it is not that I want a musical genius, musical prodigy to come from this. I want music to be the catalyst for this functional skill. And so it needs to be generalized. So if I am saying, okay, I want you to really, you're not using that left side of your body. I really want you to get your eyes on the drum, lift up your left hand and hit it. If I were just to say, play the drum, play the drum, play the drum, if that side of my body is already not utilized typically, then that is not enough of a stimulus to change the motor response. So I might give squeezes on that arm and say, hey, I'm thinking about my arm. This is a way for me to feel where my arm is so that I can move. Then I might say, okay, first thing, I want you to lift your eyes up to the drum. Then I want you to hold that stick and lift the stick up and hit that drum. So I am breaking down the steps of the motor plan to allow that individual to not have to create this complex motor plan, but instead every step is supported. And I think why it works, I think one, in my case, I'm using rhythm often as the template for that. So it's getting into different areas of the brain. The motor system is really sensitive to auditory. And so we can bypass some of the areas of the brain and get into those execution areas of motor with rhythm. So I'm using rhythm to help make that happen, but I'm also creating auditory feedback that is going to be tied to this experience, and visual, because now there's this visual target. So all of these sensory pieces are coming together, and I believe that they're creating a network that then will allow the next time, okay, I see the drum, I've got my eyes on the drum, I'm going to lift up and go. Then that movement of I need to lift up my hand to get the cup out of the cabinet, we're creating a functional network in the brain. So we might have stuck loops, but we also have functional loops that we can create. So I think the coaching is really, how do we tell the individual, this is the next thing that you need to do? Instead of, okay, if I have to make dinner, I'm not a great cook, I'm a functional cook. If you're like, okay, go make me a 7-course meal, that is way too daunting to even know where to start. But if you say, take out the recipe card. All right, you've got one card for every course. Pick the recipe that you think you're confident to do. It's like, how do we break down the steps of this expectation in a way that feels manageable and not so overwhelming? So I think whenever someone is in a stuck position, like I know I have a lot of clients that I work with who will kind of get into a squat position when it's all too much, and then they can't get out of that squat. And that behavior, I'm putting that in quotes, that motor, the thing we can observe motor wise, can be a safety issue if you're out in Europe visiting a country with your parent and it's 10 o'clock at night and you are stuck there and you can't move your body. So when someone's now in that stuck position, I'll think, okay, here's my hand. First thing I want you to do is just reach your hand up to mine. So now you've got a touch cue, you've got some kind of sensory stimulus, but I want you to think about getting your eyes on my hand, shifting from that. Okay, just kind of push your weight to each foot in that position. So it's not like, just get up and go, come on. Because that stuck pattern is so ingrained in the brain, we've got to shift out in these subtle step-by-step ways to build confidence. And again, to, I think, build a network that is accessible at another time.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Now, I was so curious. Now, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you see clients that need that body coaching. I know with our client, we've seen this where over time, not as much direction is needed, right? Their bodies start to create those pathways and those patterns, and then you don't need that. Or depending on the day, you might need it again, but and that's okay. That has to be adjusted in the moment.
Yeah, I think that the goal is we create a network that's strong that you can access anytime you want to do that thing. So I think there is a shift from coaching the body to, hey, think about what your body needs to do to get that thing done. And then maybe it's like, okay, I just want you to think in your head what the steps are. Or we give an indirect cue, like I'm going to go in the kitchen to get what I need for our meal. And then that gives the space for them to initiate that. And if it doesn't work, on the given day or the given hour, then it's like, okay, I want you to think about your feet. You're stuck in that position. So can you push up from your feet? And often after you've done it a little while, I think I will add in here, I use a lot of self-talk language. I can push into my feet. I can lift my eyes up, because I think that my goal is that the individual then is cueing themselves, and they're not hearing Michelle can push into her feet, Michelle can stand up. They're hearing their own voice in that, like, I can do this, I've got this. And so I do a lot of coaching, both from a self-talk perspective and then also from a, okay, right now, all you got to do is just get your eyes on the door. We're moving out, we're going down the stairs together. So get your eyes on the door. Or if I have time, I'll say, all right, I want you to think about what you need to do. I can get my eyes up. I can do that. I'll kind of whisper it as we go. And then the next time I might say, okay, I'm walking to the door because we're all getting in the car.
Right.
And that is often, so it's, say right now, I'm really glad you brought that up. I don't want to always do something the same way, because all that does is create one loop that all the context has to be perfect in that way for the access to happen. I want us to do it in all these different ways so that it's a much more expanded, accessible network that in different contexts, there's generalization of those skills. So I do think in all the activities and interventions that I do, in all of the coaching that I do, I try to do it differently, because novelty is also where learning and growth happens. So, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. We would in RDI, we would focus on the same thing of, we would be targeting dynamic intelligence, so that we make sure that the child or the client, many of our adults too, are able to process in a dynamic way. And I know you've mentioned the word loop, and I think it would be good just to share briefly of what is a loop, because not everybody knows that term. Trying to catch the terms, so we explain them.
This is why I love talking to Brooke, because we have different language, but then there's commonalities that I think really enhance each other's work. I think, so when I say a stuck loop, in our brains, we have short range connections and long range connections. Short range connections are things that we do that are overlearned. So it could be something that I have done over and over and over again. It could be something that I can do quickly and automatically that I don't have to think about. I think about like tying my shoes as like a short loop. I can plan my dinner. I can have a conversation with somebody while I'm doing this tying of my shoe. We all need short range connections for a variety of things. Otherwise, we would be on demand all the time. Long range connections are those slower messages coming through the brain from longer range across the brain. And they are more intentional. Sometimes they connect to other areas. They're just more complex. I'm going to say it that way, more complex things. So we need short range connections and we need long range connections. In autism, there is an abundance of short range connections. So those short range connections are for every task. It's like, okay, I'm creating this loop around this thing. But we don't want everything to be short range, nor do we want everything to be long range. Like we need the things that, like, something is dangerous, we need a short loop to say, I got to get out of here. There's a tiger running towards me, whatever. There's no thinking involved in the short range connections. It is just quick response. Because there's an overabundance of those short loops, various patterns, cognition, motor, communication, they can get stuck. That loop can be overused. And so that it's the quickest thing for the brain to get to. I think in neurotypical individuals, the one I think of that we do all the time is when somebody asks you, how you doing? What do you say? We say fine. We say fine even when we're not fine.
Right.
And so we all have these things that we do automatically. We respond automatically. But we don't consider that when somebody with autism has a speech loop and is saying the same things over and over again. It's the same as when we say fine, but we're able to kick into another, like I say, if I say, oh, I'm fine. And then I realize, wait, it's actually a dear friend of mine that's asking, and I'm not fine. And I want to tell them, no, actually, do you have a couple minutes? Let me tell you what's going on. But if it's a coworker and I don't have a personal relationship with them, then I'm going to say, yep, I'm fine, and move on. But individuals with autism can get stuck in that loop, and they don't have the flexibility in the networks in the brain to say, wait a minute, I do want to tell you that I'm not fine. So we have to look at what we see externally, these speech loops, these motor loops, and think, is this functional for them given what we're doing and given what we know about them? And if it feels impulsive or automatic or like repetitively done, then I'm going to pause and say, I see you keep getting up to turn the light on. And you've told me that you don't like the lights on in the room because the fluorescents are too bright. So I want to take a moment and really see, like, do you want the lights on? If you do, I will respect that. But I then use communication to get into those higher level, higher thinking areas of the brain to shift from that stuck response. So a stuck loop or a stuck response to me is just something that's happening repetitively and not intentionally. And I want to just make sure that this is really what you're wanting to do, because it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, I think that's so important, right? Because oftentimes I've seen the clients that are in this kind of a loop do not want to be doing that repetitive action.
Yes. And sometimes we ascribe intent because of what our nervous system feels like. And I think that's where communication comes in. Like, we have to say, I want to know what you're feeling about this, because some things are intentional and some things are not. And so I think it gives the individual a little more understanding of their brain. I mean, the whole neurodiversity, like, I think that's now become a big buzzword. Like, what does that mean exactly? To me, neurodiversity means I recognize that your brain is just different and my brain is different. Like, our brains develop differently. And so what do I know about your brain? I know that you have this excess of these short loops, these short range connections. And so you are going to be primed to have more repetitive movements. So when I see that, I'm going to pause and say, are you meaning to do that? Do you mean that? And if you do, then great. Then I'll honor that.
Right. Oh, I think it's so fantastic and so essential and important, and honoring the person as an individual, which they have the right to experience, in my opinion.
Amen.
So, okay, I want to make sure we talk about accommodations and how sensory accommodations play a role in supporting individuals with apraxia, especially during music therapy and also just during daily life too.
Yeah. I think that I say a lot of the time, my goal for the people that I work with is to enable them to be as independent as they can be. Independence does not mean I have no support or no accommodations. Independence means I have the ability to do this as wholly myself as I can. So I think about accommodations for me are my calendar. If I don't have it on the calendar, I don't do it. It's not happening. So I have a visual and a tactile experience as I'm entering something into my calendar. I have, for things that are not preferential, like exercising, I have a friend that goes with me. I have somebody, we call them accountability partners, but I think it's an accommodation to enable me to do the thing that I need for my health, for me to be my best self. So I think an accommodation is something that someone needs to be the best version of themselves. And that could be a sensory support. So when I talk about my calendar, that's a visual and tactile support. When I think about going and exercising with someone, that's a relational support. And I think if we all really looked at our lives, we have people who help us accommodate in everything. And I am considered quote unquote neurotypical. So I think because of the short range connections that I mentioned and the short loops, that leads to sensory processing challenges. So we know that the brain is different. We know that it has an abundance of these short range connections. And we know that those short range connections can lead to sensory processing difficulties. So when I think of the individuals that I work with, I think about what are their sensory needs. And if I gave them a sensory accommodation in something we're doing, would that allow them to be more successful? And I will say, the client that you and I share, he will do paddle drums on the Bosu ball, which is a half like exercise ball with a flat surface for anyone that's listening and doesn't know. He will stand on the flat side, which is so wobbly and unstable. I can't even safely stand on it to demonstrate. And these complex paddle drum motor plans, but it actually for him is what he needs to feel his body to accommodate for the challenges that he has. And then he is quite capable of doing these really complex things. So for him, the accommodation would be adding in some of this vestibular and proprioceptive feedback so that he feels his body so that he can best demonstrate it. For others, it might be, I'm going to write the 5 steps of the things that you need to do in this task. Maybe it's a functional living, a task like I got to make the bed or I've got to stack the dishwasher. And then there's just an external visual cue that allows for independent initiation and output of the response. So I think that, again, in partnership with the individual, it's what are the support? Here are some ideas I have for supports or accommodations, but how do you feel with that? Does it make you feel more autonomous? Does it make you feel more successful? Does it feel inhibiting? And if it does, then that's probably not the right accommodation. But I think that we sometimes overemphasize independence and not think about independence doesn't mean you have to do it completely by yourself. It's what supports do you need to be successful and your best self.
Yes. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I think it's so important to consider and essential in setting our clients up for success. And so before we kind of wrap up here, I just would love to have you take a second to share what you wish more people understood about apraxia and the role of music therapy as we kind of close out our conversation.
That's a big question for our final question. What do I want you to know? Music therapy is great. And I think that, and I think I touched on this earlier, I think if we don't understand apraxia and we don't consider it, then we will likely not be able to support the individual in their fullest potential. And so I encourage people just at home, at schools, and your professional settings to think about if you've asked someone to do something and they haven't done it, just try to coach their body. Like, all right, put your feet on the floor, think about standing up, just see what you see, because there's such a powerful opportunity to touch on a part of that individual that they've on 10 years, 6 years, 25 years without people understanding. So I think that would be the first thing I would say is that this motor piece, understanding the motor challenges and differences, can just tap into a whole new potential that has always been there. Like we're not doing anything different. We are just reframing. And then from a music therapy perspective, I think rhythm is such a powerful tool, and it has to be used intentionally and in collaboration with the individual, noticing how do they move, what speed do they move, and sorry, there's your attention. Apraxia is important. How do we use rhythm to create an anchor to the individual's body so that they can be really the most successful and independent that they can be. I mean, rhythm is an accommodation. So I think, and I will say, not every music therapist is the same. Everyone has different training. And so I just encourage, I often tell families, just zoom out for a minute and look at your environment and notice all the things that are rhythmic in it. And then think about your child, adult or young child, and how they gravitate towards rhythm or music, because that gives you a lot of insight into what are they using as an accommodation in their environment. And then how can you match that? Like sometimes I'll say, you'll hear a fan, and that is, if it's on, you get more focused attention while someone's doing their homework, or more fluidity when they're moving to get their shoes on to leave the house. And then I think of how can you create that? Can I just tap my leg or clap my hands and give that stimulus so the brain has this anchor to hold on to? Rhythm is a pretty amazing. I mean, I think all the time, I'm so glad that I get to use it as a music therapist, but it's not just a music therapy tool. Rhythm, we are intrinsically rhythmic beings. And so how do we use rhythm to enhance all the potential that we see in every person that we encounter?
I love it. You make it look very easy, I have to say. You've got that rhythm down. I'd love to have you just share how people can find music therapists. If you'd like to share information about you as well, feel free to share whatever you think would be helpful.
Thank you. So I have a website. It is hardyautismservices.com. I have a couple of music therapists that work for me. Again, not everyone is trained in this way. American Music Therapy Association has a website. You can find music therapists on there. Neurologic Music Therapy has a website that you can find those that are trained in that. I think understanding the neuro piece is going to be critical. And I think really I would ask questions like, do you know what apraxia is? Do you know how rhythm affects movement when you're talking to a music therapist? Do you presume competence, and what does that mean to you? I think all of those things are really good starting points. And I also, I do sessions. I love the work I do, but I also mentor music therapists. So if somebody finds a music therapist that wants to learn, I'm also happy to support them in that journey, because I think this work is so important and it's so effective if you understand these pieces. So come look me up. Come find me.
That is great. You couldn't find a better mentor if you're listening. So definitely recommend that if somebody needs a mentor in this area. And I will make sure to include all that in the show notes as well, so our listeners can have access to those links. And just thank you so much, Michelle, for being here today. This was such a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I'm sure we could go on and on, but we will need to wrap up.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I think networking with our community makes such a difference. I think we all need to not work in isolation. We need to work together and have a great impact. So thank you for including me.
Yes, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm dancing on the edge again. The wind is calling my name. I'm dancing on the edge again. This time I'm not looking back, babe. You can change me, you can tell me down. I'll leave echoes in every place I find. I break the molds with rebels mind. I'm a hurricane of free, born mind.
The information provided on this podcast is for general informational purposes only. The content shared is based on the experiences, opinions, and perspectives of the hosts and their guests, and should not be construed as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment recommendations. The discussions and topics covered are intended to foster understanding and awareness of autism therapies, but are not a substitute for professional medical guidance. Before making any decisions regarding therapies or treatments, we strongly encourage you to consult with a qualified healthcare provider
who can provide personalized recommendations based on your unique circumstances. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree that the hosts, guests, and producers are not responsible for any consequences, damages, or outcomes arising from the use or application of any information during the show.